And as I was expertising myself in college admissions, because I knew what I knew as a school counselor, but I was going to start charging people to help them with admissions. So I wanted to really know. And I was taking courses and going to webinars and conferences. I realized very quickly that there were a lot of my peers doing what I was doing who just felt like they didn't want to touch disabilities with a 10-foot pole. They just felt unprepared to do so. And I had just come off being the 504 coordinator at my school, and I had been to so many IEP meetings in my career. And I thought, this is a perfect niche for me. And then I started expertising myself in that direction as well. So, um, yeah, that's just a little bit about me. We were talking earlier, I split my time between upstate New York, way upstate near Canada, and near Montreal, Canada, straight from the city, and Jackson, Wyoming, where we don't have any snow. So here's what we're going to talk about tonight. So we're going to talk about campus support for students with disabilities, how to research colleges for students who have a learning disability or are neurodivergent, and considerations with respect to disclosing a disability. And so when I was invited to do this presentation, although it's the Autism Society, I was told we could have lots of different types of neurodivergence here. And so let's be more inclusive. So I scheduled the presentation to do that. So there will be a Q&A at the end, so put your questions in the chat. I would have your phone available. There were so many things that I wanted to tell you that I didn't necessarily have time to tell you. And so I included some freebies and free downloads. We do a lot of, we put out a lot of content in all different places, a newsletter and Instagram and Facebook. And so I kind of gathered some things up for you. So you'll need that to scan the QR codes to get the freebies. And I guess Lisa and I didn't coordinate this, but I was just thinking, if you want the slides, I can send them to you. Just email me and I'll send them back to you. Michelle, 2 L's, at thecollegespy.com. And I'd be happy to send them to you. Okay, let's get started. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is how colleges support students with disabilities. I put out I have lots of pictures. I've visited over 300 colleges. I make my students visit colleges so they know what the schools are really all about, and I hold myself to the same standard. So, you know, when you're thinking about college supports, I think it's important to understand in advance how college differs from high school. So college is a time when the expectations increase while supports decrease. And when I say this to families, when the student has some type of a disability or a difference, they get anxious about that supports are decreasing, expectations are increasing. So let me give you some more details. And these are things you probably know, but aren't necessarily thinking about. So I want to point it out. So if you read from left to right, this is just the differences between college and high school. So in high school, attendance is mandatory and it's monitored, where in college, the policy is going to be listed on the syllabus and it'll be different depending on the course. In high school, if a class is missed, the teachers are going to automatically provide the information that was missed, the content. They're going to give the student the content. In college, if the class is missed, the student's responsible to initiate assistance, either from a peer or a teaching assistant or the professor. In high school, teachers will intervene if a student is struggling. And in college, struggling students tend to really need to initiate and advocate if they need assistance. By the time the college intervenes, usually, there are some exceptions, the student is failing already or has failed and is on academic probation. If they intervene at all. So colleges offer different levels of support, and I'll get to that later in some later slides. In high school, so many reminders of due dates. In college, if you're lucky, you'll get that, but mostly the due dates are on the syllabus and the students need to know to check it. And for students who struggle with executive function, that can be a problem. High school, there's extra credit. It's very unusual in college to have that. Same with makeup tests, very unusual in college. And in high school, the information that's presented from the teacher clarifies what's in the textbook, where in college, often, not always, but often, the information will supplement the textbook. So there's a lot of learning that needs to be done independently. So it's just some examples of how college and high school are different from one another, because they are Very different. You can still hear me, Lisa. I just want to make sure that I didn't lose you. Yeah.
Yeah, you're doing great.
Okay.
I can hear you. Everyone
Okay.
else, if anyone can't, please, raise your hand, put something in the chat or
I just can't
good.
see you. So I'm like, oh, I'll just make sure everybody's still there. Okay, so we're going to talk about how colleges support students with disabilities. And I use the word disability because that's the language of the law and of the that the colleges are going to be using. So the first way that they support students is by providing accommodations. And accommodations are required by law through Section 504. And I made in red access to and participate in. So this Section 504 says that students need to be given the equal opportunity to have access to and participate in programming, which is supported by federal funding, which all the colleges have federal funding, even when they're private. So a lot of times, because it's Section 504 that gives accommodations to students in college, families will think that their child needs a 504 plan in order to get these accommodations. That is false. It's a myth. And it's a myth that sometimes high schools will even perpetuate, because what they'll do is they'll take a student off an IEP senior year and put them on a 504 and tell you, you need this for accommodations. You don't, and I'll get into what you actually do need. It's a different part of Section 504. It's a different part of the law that's giving these accommodations. So I just listed out some common accommodations that are given on the college level. So you'll see things like extended time, note taker, priority registration for classes, right? Some students really need to have classes in the morning or the afternoon, maybe perhaps for focus reasons, possibly. Course waivers, a reduced course load. What you're not going to see on this list, because it's so often not given, is extended time on assignments. And that is a big change for some students who are used to relying on that, but it's unlikely to be given. They do give accommodations that are what they call reasonable, but what's reasonable is subjective. But these are just some common ones. So I often get asked, which accommodations should you request? Because you do have to make a request. The student makes the request. And so here's just some advice. I think that students should request the same accommodations that they use at school and any others that they feel might be helpful. Think about the time when the last time that expectations increased while support decreased. That was when your student probably moved from middle school to high school, and they might have needed certain accommodations then that right now they don't need. Well, since that's going to be happening again, you might want to ask for those accommodations again. Also, keep in mind that accommodations might be offered to your child informally. So if you just happen to, your kid goes to a school where all students get extra time on tests, well, that's not necessarily going to happen in college. So you want to make sure you request that as an accommodation. So anything informal, request, especially if you're at a private school, there might be a lot of informal accommodations. So those are my suggestions. And then also to say to the Office of Disability, sometimes called the Office of Accessibility, given this diagnosis or these diagnoses, what other accommodations do other students request? What else might you recommend that I request? Because they'll work with you and help you. So let me explain how to get accommodations. So you have to register with the Office of Disability or Accessibility. Sometimes it's Disability Services Office. There's different names. There's one on every campus. And you need to provide some sort of documentation of a disability. You do not need to have a 504 or an IEP. In fact, most of the time, the colleges don't want a 504 or an IEP. Other times, they say, sure, if you have it, you can give it to us. But what they really want is documentation that you have a disability by the person who's given that diagnosis. It used to be that the disability needed to be diagnosed within the last 3 years, or if you had a neuropsych, it needed to be within the last 3 years, and they often wanted adult norms over normed with children. Colleges are becoming a lot more flexible about that because they don't want to put up barriers to getting accommodations. In my experience, colleges, it's not that difficult to get like these accommodations where you have to fight for them sometimes in high school. In college, they, if they can give it, they're like, okay, yeah, we're happy to give you this extended time, you know, extra time or whatever it is that you might need. Sometimes they struggle, like if you need a single room and they don't have that many available on campus, but for a lot of them, they're pretty generous. So what you want to ask about is what documentation do you accept or for accommodation requests? Like what is it you actually need? And sometimes this is right on the website under the Office of Disabilities web page of the website. How recent does the documentation need to be? When do first year students apply for accommodations? Sometimes it's the summer before you go to college, so, but it's always after you've made the final decision. You will not know what accommodations that you get until you know where you're going to college, which is so uncomfortable for families because they want to make sure they have the right accommodations before they commit to the college. It does not work that way. And you just need to know that. Do you have to reapply every semester or every year? And what happens once the accommodations are approved? So sometimes families think, oh, they're going to help me implement these accommodations like they do in high school. And many colleges will just give you a piece of paper or a digital piece of paper, and basically a letter that says you are approved for these accommodations, and you have to talk to the professor on your own and advocate for yourself. And for some kids, students, that doesn't work. It's not going to work for them until they learn how to do it. And this is why we set up academic coaching at the College Spy, was to work with students on those self-advocacy skills, because I was noticing getting into college, easy. Staying in college and having all the skills needed, and it sounds like you're going to have a presentation on that next month, not as easy. Don't forget to put your questions in the chat. So accommodations is one way colleges support students with disabilities. Another way that some schools will support students, neurodivergent students, is through services that are offered based on a fee that you'll pay probably per semester anywhere from $2,000 to $5,000 approximately to get additional services. And I wrote here may include, and I listed a lot of different services because each college is offering something a little bit different. I think based on what they saw their need was in their population. So oftentimes there's academic coaching and mentoring. You'll want to know whether this is offered by peers or professionals. Not that one is necessarily better than the other, but your student might have a preference. Executive function coaching, tutoring, social skills, peer mentoring, self-advocacy training, help with organization and time management, and assistance with the dorm, help engaging with peers and social activities, counseling. It could include a combination of these things. Very rarely do I find something that's so comprehensive that they have all of it. So you want to look at these fee-based programs and decide, well, is this what my student actually needs? If not, I get a suggestion a little bit later what to do. So you usually do need to apply for these services separately from admissions to the college. So you apply to the college to get in. Separately, you apply for these types of services. And sometimes students will get into the college, but not the fee-based program. And then, well, I'll get into that in a little bit, but they can be very competitive, either because they don't have space for all the students in need, or they don't want to give services if they don't think they can support you. So because they don't want their programs to fail and not be funded. And that's just the hard truth of it. So they want to make sure they're accepting students that where they're like, this is a good fit for our program, which you want to. You don't want to be paying for something that's not going to be useful to your student. So you have to meet their criteria, so the program is successful. So people often will say to me, well, where are these fee-based programs? And they're popping up every day, like year to year, because I'm consulting one-on-one with clients. I know where there are some, but I don't assume there isn't a new one starting at a college I don't know. So if I'm like, well, this college would be great for this student, but I've not heard of a fee-based program there, I check again because they keep popping up and popping up. This is just a book that you can get on Amazon, the KNW Guide to College Programs and Services. think they're probably up to the 12th or 13th edition. And it's pretty good. We don't have a it's the best one that's going to be out there. And so what you can do is look at it for ideas and then hop on the websites of those individual colleges to get more information about the different programs. So I would recommend getting the book, or I'm going to put it here. So we've got accommodations, we have fee-based services, and then we have help that's offered for everyone. So these things on the slide are not offered at every college, but I do see them over and over again. So sometimes when I'm looking up, gosh, is this school going to be supportive enough for the student that's in front of me? And I don't find a fee-based program, but I find they just support everybody. Like if you need an academic coach, you sign up to get an academic coach. If you need the tutoring, the math center, the science center, writing center, there's just, or like some colleges will give out, when you get there, you get a mentor, you get, 4 different academic advisors. I'm thinking of Western New England and Massachusetts, one of my favorites, that they support everyone. Another one I love is James Madison University. There's just help for everybody. And that might be the right thing for your particular student. So if there isn't a fee-based program, I don't know that you want to rule out a college without looking for what else there is. If I just see tutoring and it's just peer tutoring, depending on which student is in front of me, I might decide that's not enough. I can't put that school on their list, except if we want to hire outside support, which is idea number 5. Let's talk about idea number 4. So we have 2 colleges in our country that are specifically for students who are coming off of an IEP or 504, for so students with learning disability, autism, ADHD. They are Landmark College, which is in Putney, Vermont. They're both actually pretty rural, and Beacon College, which is in Leesburg, Florida. I have done fly-in programs where they fly in people who do what I do and spend 2 days telling us all about the school and giving us tours and meeting with students. I really was impressed with both. They both offer 4-year degrees, bachelor's degrees. Landmark has more associate's degrees than Beacon does. So sometimes people will use, not that you can't do this at Beacon, but so I heard about it more at Landmark, that they'll use it to get their first 2 years and then transfer to a different 4-year institution that might have more majors. So if you're kind of thinking, well, my student isn't going to be able to complete a 4-year degree, even with the services I just told you about, you might want to look at Landmark and Beacon and see if those might be a good fit. Both are pretty small colleges, like under 500 students. And I was impressed. I just can't decide which one I like better. So, but it's got to be the right fit. So which one I like better for that particular student, that's what matters. And then the other thing that you can consider doing is hiring outside support, because, there are colleges out there that might not have the right support, but might be right for your student in another way. So just some things you could look up on your own. There's the college internship program and the college living experience in Mansfield Hall. All 3 of these programs have locations around the country. So depending on where you might want to go to school. And so basically you're living at the program and then utilizing the colleges that are in the town of wherever that program is. So, and I have done I haven't visited yet, but I've done presentations, listened to their virtual presentations and some in person at conferences. And I've been very impressed. It's pricey, $60,000 a year, something like that. Your student is living there. They're getting a lot of executive function support and a lot of hand holding around whatever it is they're doing, whether it's an internship in the community or going to college in the community, which could be community college, could be 4-year college. Or to earn a bachelor's degree. You can hire an executive function coach or an academic coach. I mean, it's not always the best thing to have the fee-based because they don't always communicate back with you. But if you hire a coach, and our coach, Lisa Delfino, she's fantastic. I'd be happy to meet with you and see if it's a fit. But there's lots of them. And you've hired them. So they're obviously going to talk to you and say, yeah, so-and-so didn't do their work, or they did, and they're doing fine, and we're not concerned, or kind of thing, where you're going to hear less from the fee-based program for a variety of different reasons, whether that's FERPA, whether it's just a kind of a belief in the college, like this person is an adult and they need to be learning to manage their own things, or they don't have the resources to reach out and talk to parents that frequently. Also, just hiring a tutor separately. So I have a lot of students who will continue with their tutor and their executive function coach from high school into college. Just keep those same people that might come up to you, and that continuity of support can be really helpful. So those are the 5 ways that colleges support students who are on the spectrum or neurodivergent. I want to jump in, so put your questions in the Q&A about that. I want to jump into how to do some college research, and I've got some tips for you. So take out your phone and grab this, it's free. Just make sure you put in the code ACRON, you know how to spell that, so that the price, goes to free. So, any college can be good for a neurodivergent student. There's no college. People always say, well, which one's going to be the best? And it's like, well, the students are so different from one another. And everything that a neurotypical student might be looking for in a college, so is a neurodivergent student. And then they might need some extra support, whether that's socially or academically, sometimes professionally, beyond what they also want. So this goes beyond the scope of this presentation to talk about just how do you do research in general. So I have a college research guide where I put a lot of different tips of things you might not have thought of, like, it's not like, oh, go to the website. It's more than that. So grab it and make sure you grab it for free. Just no reason to pay for that. Happy to share it. So let's see. So college research is really hard. This is probably the first thing I go over with families, because they think, oh, it's easy. Let's just tell our student to do college research, or we'll just do it quickly and figure out. It takes a lot of time. It's very challenging. And for a student with a disability or a difference, or any kind of learning challenge, their needs are often unique and complex, making it a lot harder. And sometimes what's difficult is that there isn't a college that checks all the boxes. And it's almost like when I'm working with families, I need to give them permission to stretch their criteria and to compromise because they need to. And there's 2 places that I see families compromising the most for neurodivergent students. One is money, that they're willing to stretch in order to find the right fit. And the other is distance from home. So that initially they might say, we want to stay within 3-hour drive. And it's like all of a sudden, like, okay, we're going to look at 6 hours because we can find the right thing if we drive further. Or now we're going to do a direct flight. So you also might have to compromise, and compromising, that might not be the right thing for your family to compromise. Everybody's different. So my recommendation is really to start researching early, because it's going to take longer. But just keep in mind that your child is going to change and grow and mature and gain all these new skills. So even if your kid is in 10th grade now or 9th grade now, they will change. So what you're looking for will change too. And that also makes it more challenging. I've had families say to me every year, you told me they were going to change and mature and be ready, and they weren't, and I didn't believe you. And I'm like, yeah, look at them, they did it. Because I've been doing this a long time with a lot of different kids. So in terms of college research, specifically for neurodivergent students, who to ask for information, you're going to be contacting the Office of Disability or Accessibility. And these people, in my experience, will meet with you as a prospective student and a prospective family. And when you're touring campus, you can visit with them, or you can set up a phone call or a Zoom. This is the office responsible for accommodations and sometimes other supports on campus. They don't communicate with admissions. And even if they did, it would only help your kid get in, which we'll get into in this third part of the presentation. But they don't. So you don't have to have any concern that your conversation with them is going to have, any of it is going to go over to admissions. It won't. Recruitment's just not part of their job. So I really want to encourage you to contact the Office of Disability and ask questions. They're so, so, so helpful. And if they are not, you probably don't want your student going to that school because that's the office they're going to be working with in order to get extra support. So what are you going to ask this office, right? So I've got a list of 30 questions for you. So there, it's on the next slide. I'll show you in a minute. But you want to ask about accommodations and if these accommodations that your kid uses in high school are offered at the college. You can't ask if your child will be approved for them because they won't tell you the answer to that. They might say this type of documentation is usually approved, but they really won't tell you until you've made a commitment and you've applied for accommodations at the school, a commitment to attending that school. And just don't forget your child might be using some accommodations informally. So this is a list of questions that I created. So if you want the slides, like screenshot it, but if you want the slide, just email me. I put my email down here, michelle@thecollegespy.com, and I'll send the slides to Lisa as well. But it's a list of 30 questions to ask the Office of Disability. And you know, check off the ones that are super important to you. The ones with the little spyglass next to it, I wanted to point out during this presentation and just think it through with you. So the third one, what is the process for communicating accommodations to professors? So this might be very important to your family if your student is going to need help with this, that they're not going to use their accommodations unless there's somebody guiding them, because they might say, it's students on their own. They need to know what to do. And or we tell them what to do, they just have to go do it. If they don't, they don't. And for some of you, that's an okay answer. That works because your kid's going to do it. And for others, it might be they're not going to do it. Or even better is, what can we do now in order to get them prepared so they will do it? Where do you as the parent and maybe even your case manager for an IEP or or the 504 plan, where can you pull back so the student takes a step forward so it's not a huge leap when they get to college? What happens if a professor won't grant an accommodation? The answer that you need to hear back is, what are you talking about? Of course they're going to grant an accommodation. That's the law. And if you hear something different, red flag. What assistive technology do you use? But even more importantly, do you train the students in how to use it? I know all of you are sitting there going, yep, like we've tried assistive technology, but if the training isn't there, the student isn't going to use it. Who provides the tutoring? How are they trained? Are they peers or professionals? And then number 30, how would you describe the culture on this campus in regards to disability? I would love an open-ended question to ask to hear the answer to that at various colleges. What is it that they're going to say that might help you know if the school is a good fit? And there's lots more. So shoot me an email. I'll get you the slides. So just some green, excuse me, green and red flags when you're evaluating the disability assistance on campus. So they almost coordinate left to right. Green, it's going to be great if they're flexible on documentation compared to not flexible. If it's a knowledgeable staff, and there are a lot of them, as opposed to just being understaffed or they haven't a clue, right, which you can assess. There's very high turnover in the Office of Disabilities. It's not an easy job, and I don't think it's a very high paid job. So sometimes they are understaffed and underfunded. Philosophy of meeting a student where they are is a green flag. Coordination with other services on campus is a great thing, as opposed to, where they're like, oh, well, we'll connect the student with the tutoring center, the counseling center, and that's happening actively. Another green flag is training for assistive technology, new programs added to address needs. So anytime when you hear something new that's happening on campus, that's a pro. And just having a culture of problem solving, as opposed to, no, we don't do it that way. On the right, so I talked about inflexible documentation and understaffed, but if they only use peers and you don't have professionals, that's potentially a red flag. Process to get accommodations approved is not a good thing. If they don't have drop-in office hours or the student can just show up, that's so much better than the student needing to make an appointment, especially if the student struggles with things like that. And the needs of the whole student not being considered would be a red flag. So I want to just go over how to ask your questions. So one thing that you need to realize is that the college recognizes your child as an adult, and they really prefer to speak to the person coming to campus. And you're going to start to feel that as you research colleges, that they're like, well, they will talk to you, but they'd rather talk to your kid. And most of the time, that's what you're going to find. And I think what's important to understand, and you're going to hear about this in April. I think I know who your speaker is too. I've had her on my podcast, but your child's going to need to self-advocate a lot in college. And so if during the you can use the process of exploring colleges and learning about colleges to have them practice that. So for example, you need to call and ask questions of the Office of Disability, do it together on speakerphone. So you're modeling it for your child, right? Or say to your student, okay, I'm going to get us started. You're going to ask the first question, then I'll do the follow-up. So that practicing. So I think that that's important, because you're going to find as your student gets older and older that you don't have as much access. And finally, I want to talk to you about disclosing disabilities on the application. So I have a Facebook group. It's called Parents of College-Bound Students with ASD, LDs, and ADHD. And I surveyed the families. About 200 people responded, to the little poll in Facebook. And, what were they worried about in terms of disclosing autism or disability on their application? And pretty much all of these things is, we're worried my kid isn't going to get accepted. And so there's going to be some discrimination, and therefore we don't want to disclose. So I am here to dispel that myth. So let me give you some information. First up, what worries Gen Z about disclosing? I work with Gen Z students all the time who have LDs, ADHD, ASD, and nothing worries them about disclosing. They have grown up in a world that they have learned this phrase learning difference, and they don't use learning difference so much in college. They say disability, and they're like, it's just different, right? It's not something to be ashamed of. So kids will sometimes get confused when they're like, why doesn't my parent want me to talk about this part of my academic and social experience on my application? So just some information from my experience of what I'm doing. So college is very different from high school, where differences are not just welcome, they are desired. And colleges really do want diversity on campus in all of its forms, including neurodiversity. And what they're really looking for is not so much, well, does the student have a disability and we can't let them, come, because they have autism or ADHD or whatever it is. They want to make sure that you can succeed academically at their campus. You have the ability to do the work. That is the most important thing to most colleges. They need to protect their graduation rates and the retention rate, so the percent of students that come back sophomore year. And they're interested in how you're going to contribute to the campus community as well. But mostly they want to know you can do the work and you're not going to fail out. So if your teen is qualified, they are just as likely to get accepted as a student that is not autistic. Just as likely. And I know this because I've talked to admissions counselors, because it's just part of my experience working with families. So what else are they looking for? They know you can do the work. They want to know how you can contribute to the campus community. And then they're looking for these other things that can really set you apart from other applicants. And if you read through this list, you're probably sitting there smiling and going, my autistic student, yeah, we've got hyper focusing going on, for example. They have a really strong area of interest. And well, isn't that what colleges would want to graduate? A person who's really excited about their field and can hyper focus on it and just really flourish in their work, and then say, hey, I went to this college. I'm an alum of wherever. So it's different from high school. A lot of neurodivergent students have these qualities, and colleges want them. Sometimes people will say to me, but my student only got good grades and test scores because they have accommodations, and colleges just don't see it that way. Like, you may think, and your child may think, yeah, I got good grades and test scores because I had extra time or whatever type of accommodation. But what the colleges think is, well, this student is highly motivated to use their accommodations, meaning they'll do it in college too and be successful. They understand their learning profile, their strengths and weaknesses. If you don't, you're not going to be as successful in college. You've persevered in the face of a challenge. Who wouldn't want that? College will be challenging. And then you're willing to ask for help. I would say probably that the students I work with that are neurodivergent, they're more willing to ask for help and work independently. It's both, but they're when they need help, they say, I need help. And these are all qualities that will help students succeed on campus and they're desired by colleges. So lots of benefits to disclosing. In my opinion, the drawbacks are none. That's how strongly I feel about it. And I'm usually a little more wishy-washy, and because in admissions, we say things like, it depends on the situation. But in this case, I kind of threw in on the right there. Sometimes it's not helpful to disclose autism. Like if your student is struggling to explain their disability or their difference or their challenge or neurodivergence, that might not help them get in, but for the most part, I think disclosing can be very helpful. It can add context to a transcript, explain a low grade or why you chose a certain course, explain test scores that don't match grades, either because they're so high or so much lower than grades, highlight a student's resistance and persistence, and I explain the other ones. So I just mentioned the last one, that it can assist in finding the right fit. If your student did not get accepted because they were autistic, you don't want your kid going to that school anyway, right? So I just don't see the drawback of disclosing. You can challenge me on that in the Q&A if you want to in the chat. The other thing to know is that colleges often know. So I evaluate transcripts all the time, the way admissions counselors will when I first meet a student. And I ask about learning disabilities and differences and autism, but I can usually tell you could just tell on the transcript. Like, for example, there'll be study skills or learning strategies. Like they don't put the neurotypical kids in that so much. Letters of recommendation could refer to it. There's any big discrepancy in standardized testing, like the math is high and the verbals or the reading writing is super low, or the grades are one way and the standardized testing is another, is like a little red flag. Like, what happened here? If foreign language is missing from the transcript, sometimes if I see ASL instead, sometimes, not always, just makes me wonder, and any obvious areas of strength and weakness. So they can tell anyway, so it can be really helpful to just take the narrative into your own hands. So if you're going to disclose, you want to write in a very straightforward way and not tell a story like you would with your college essay. The description absolutely has to be written in the student's voice. You don't want it to sound like a parent wrote it, although I know a lot of times parents do help. And the things you're going to include are the accommodations, your self-advocacy skills, perseverance, use of resources, resilience, lessons learned, struggles, and triumphs. All the things they'd want to know so that they can let you in, because that tough stuff happens in college. I find it helpful to go over with my students. Sometimes they have a hard time writing this and putting it all together. So we'll just answer the questions individually and then learn how to tie it together. But things like, what's your disability? Or how does it affect you? Or they could say, I was diagnosed with autism at this time. Don't need to say the word disability in any way. What is challenging about having it? What are the positives? What have you learned? Different skills, and etc. So it can be helpful for them to answer the questions individually and then write a statement. When they're doing so, sometimes their statements come out angry and blaming others and resentful because they've had a hard time in school. And so what we do is just talk about the purpose of the statement, and we get those things out of there, because it's not going to help them get accepted to college. And want to just validate the student's experience, but also say there's a purpose for this essay, this little essay, and there's a spot to put it in the application. So we want to make sure that that type of, I guess, negativity is not there. So just some things to watch out for. Okay. Actually, there was one more thing I wanted to mention there before I get into this, just evidence to the contrary. So this is just to explain, is like when students are like, I'm a fantastic writer, but their writing is atrocious, for example, right? So you want to make sure that, it's a very truthful statement. And anytime you can give examples as proof can be super helpful, as opposed to just telling, you want to show. So I want to take your questions, but I also want to just tell you a little bit about how to get more information from the College Spy, because we're everywhere with lots of info. If you go onto Facebook at the College Spy, that's where you're going to find we have an ADHD goes to college group. We actually have an autism goes to college group linked. And then the biggest group I do is parents of college-bound students with learning disabilities, ADHD and ASD. Our Instagram is helpful and pretty, mostly because I don't do it. It's not my area of strength, is design. But we also tell you where you can apply to college for free on Instagram. So you can give us a follow there. We have a podcast, and I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn. Our next webinar is actually on Thursday. So if you want to hear, this is not a disabilities specific one or neurodivergent specific one, but we're talking about 5 things colleges want to know about you before they offer an acceptance. So that's free. And then I teach a class called College Admissions 101 for parents of neurodivergent students, which is much deeper dive. It's a 3-week long class and it's live on Zoom. And I just linked it. It's not very expensive. It's $219, but I made it half off. So it's like $100. So if you're interested, you can scan that QR code and just put in half off so that you get your discount. So I just wanted to be generous with people from Akron. So that's it, Lisa.
Oh my goodness.
I know that was a lot.
That was a lot, but that was a lot of great information. And yes, please do send me the slides because I will push them out in the after email that I send out so that those who weren't able to attend will have it as well, but they don't get the benefit of actually having you here and getting very specific questions answered. So
Yeah, did you get a bunch of questions?
unfortunately, I don't see any in the chat, but I have a question.
Oh, go.
Well, actually, I definitely have a comment, and that is thank you so much for myself. I'm mom to twin boys. They are 24 this month. And so I have a neurotypical and a neurodivergent. My neurodivergent doesn't want to go to college. But I know even with my neurotypical, there were some probably neurodivergent characteristics about him. And so he, didn't go onto campus until he was a junior, and probably could have benefited from some of these same areas of learning how to advocate for themselves. And so thank you so much for helping us as parents understand what the difference is between high school and college, because it is, even going into the world of employment with my neurodivergent, the adult world for disabilities, no matter what their level is or however we have determined their needs for support, it's all different. And the things that they get while they are in high school sometimes don't prepare them. So one thing I'm wondering is if you're in your toolbox of things, do you have any type of checklist of skills that you might be able to push out, that parents and educators could start to think about incorporating, say, like in sophomore year or something like that? I think about executive functioning and your advocacy, absolutely, but just wondering if there are some other tips in that area.
I don't have a checklist of skills. The way I work with students on college readiness, so like, I mean, Lisa Delfino on our team, our academic coach, she does that type of, get ready and be ready for school. She like uses the students' current course content to help prep them. And the way I do it is around the college search. So for example, students who are afraid to make a telephone call when we need to call admissions, I don't just do it for them, I do it with them. Or students who can't show up to a meeting on time, or students who won't use their own calendar. They're like, oh, we'll make the meeting with my mom. And it's like, we need to stop making the meeting with your mom because you're going to have to set up your own meetings when you get to college. So I want you to practice here. So that's what I'm doing as a college admissions consultant, is using our work just to help them grow their skills. So like if they miss the meeting, the answer isn't, well, we're mad at you and you skip it. It's more like, well, okay, you need to set an alarm. Oh, I did, but I set it 1 minute before the meeting or the time of the meeting. That doesn't work. So because then you don't have time to get ready or to let the person know you can't make it. Oh, like they don't realize that stuff. So that's kind of how I'm working with kids, is more like as it comes up, like, oh, there's a red flag they're gonna have. Because at the college side, like I said, getting in, not as hard as staying in. And we want students not just to get in places and let's just be excited about it, but actually do well when they get there, right? Like that's
Absolutely.
really the
Set them
side.
up for success.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But is it Beth Felson that's coming next week? Next month, I mean.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
she's gonna have your checklist for you. So
Good.
Beth and I have done webinars and things together, so she's gonna be perfect to talk about that type of thing.
Nice. And then if someone were to utilize a service like yours, do they do it in the same time frame as kind of high school? Like, do you start in the junior year, or is it better to start sooner?
Oh, well,
Or
uh, it's always better to start sooner, in my opinion, because there's so many things that kids can potentially do, and that to help them become college ready and to just be more likely to get accepted. So when I have the opportunity to weigh in on course selection, what different activities the student is doing, it can make a difference. And oftentimes it's really helpful because like a parent will say to their student, you really need to be getting more involved. We want you to make more friends, and it will help for they'll pull out anything to get their kid involved. And the kids are like, no. And then I say it, they'll just do it. Really. Or sometimes it's because I'll say, well, it's the resistance. Why don't you want to do it? And then we can problem solve around that. I think it's because of my guidance counselor background that like it's easy for me to be like, I'm wearing my admissions hat. This is how you get in. I'm wearing my school counselor hat. I care about you. I want to make sure that you are, doing what you need to do socially, or doing what you need to do academically, or preparing. Sometimes we'll be working on, well, what are the different majors you could potentially choose from? And do we want to set up a job shadow or an informational interview to learn more about a certain um,
yes.
career kind of thing? So the sooner we can start doing that, the better. But I don't meet weekly with ninth graders. It's not necessary. Um, but yeah, a lot of people will come to us end of 10th grade, beginning of 11th, sometimes end of 11th. So
Gotcha. Well,
yeah.
sometimes that's even a mystery for parents, is when do you start? Because I know for us, exactly what you were describing in the beginning, we have to know all of the things that our neurotypicals learn, but then there are so many things that we need to research on top of that. So yes, I can definitely understand the additional time that's needed for things too.
Yep. And if you're here tonight, start now. Just start by coming to the free webinar on Thursday. And you don't even have to come, just register and you'll get the recording. So like, but then you watch it at your convenience, because then it's like you're slowly just getting information till then you'll know when you're ready for because every family is different too. Like some families, it's like, it's time to start talking about college in 8th grade. And like, it's really not damaging their kid to do that. And for other families, it's not time until after the gap year. And that's okay,
Hmm.
right? Everybody's
Yes.
different.
Everybody is different. Absolutely. Well, Michelle, folks, if you don't have any additional questions for Michelle, we thank you so much for bringing this to us. Thankful that there are people out there like yourself who are able to guide parents and students who want to go to college. We need to have options for everyone. Um, Michelle will send me the slides, and then I will send you guys a follow-up email once I have everything put on the website. So give me about 2 to 3 days to do that, but it will be coming. And in the meantime, Michelle has included her information, but you can also reach out to me if you have additional questions or need additional resources. We're happy to help in any way we can. So
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. It was fun.
absolutely. Look forward to working with you potentially again in the future on something else.
Absolutely. Thanks,
All
Lisa.
right.
Bye,
Thank
everybody.
you. Hope everyone has a wonderful week, and hopefully we won't get any snow this week, and that we will see you at one of our upcoming events. So good night, everyone.
Good night.